The vaccine timeline is set to be delayed. Will that also blow out the timeline for international students getting back to Australia in person?
I don't know the answer to that question. We've never set concrete deadlines for when large numbers of international students can come back. I'd said a few weeks ago, Tom, that I was increasingly hopeful that larger numbers would be able to come back for semester one of next year. And I'm still hopeful that that might be the case, but I certainly can't provide guarantees. We're always going to be guided by the expert medical advice. In the short term, though, we've been very clear to the states and territories and to the universities themselves that we will consider proposals for them, from them, which allow pilots of international students to come in if the quarantine beds for international students are above and beyond the quarantine beds which are there for returning Australians, and if their chief medical officers give us the assurance that that would be done in a very safe manner. But to date, we've received no such proposals for such pilots.
Given that possibility, though, people stuck overseas right now, and perhaps in the future when students are coming, would say there's a possibility for us to get back. There's not just a will.
Well, our priority is on those Australians who are overseas. They're our number one priority. And that's why we've been consistent in our view to the states and territories and to the university sector that if you want us to even consider a pilot, the quarantine beds must be above and beyond the beds which are set aside for returning Australians, because returning Australians are our priority and always will be.
Dan Tehan, the Trade Minister, said on the program that it could be that business trips and also international students could get priority over holiday makers. Is that something you're pushing for?
Well, they're things that we'll have to consider down the track. International students tend to come here, they tend to stay for a few years, they spend money here, and so they have been important for our economy and for our society. But we're just not in the position to be making concrete decisions in relation to these matters, Tom.
Right, but could that mean international students get priority over holiday makers, whether they're coming to Australia or leaving Australia to go overseas?
Well, again, we'll take advice from the expert medical panels on this, particularly in relation to the efficacy of the vaccines and whether or not, if you have the vaccine, we've got quite good certainty that you won't get seriously ill, but there isn't the certainty yet as to whether or not you can still transmit the virus, and that still needs to be worked through.
Education Minister Alan Tudge, thanks for your time.
Thanks very much, Tom.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. The different states and territories will each need to come up with their own proposals to return international students to their universities. And as of right now, as of today, Federal Education Minister Alan Tudge says he's yet to receive any concrete proposals from any of the states or territories on exactly how that will happen. Now, we know Victoria, in particular, just a few weeks ago, submitted a proposal to the PMO to allow 120 of the economic cohort above their 1,000 capacity for return travellers per week, with international students classified within that economic cohort. That was rejected. Here was Education Minister and Acting Premier James Merlino speaking about that earlier today.
They want it separate to the cap, and we've made it clear that our cap is 1,000 and we can do a further 120 for economic cohorts.
So exactly why that proposal from the Victorian government was rejected is unclear at this stage. There are a number of other early stages proposals being worked on, including by universities here in Victoria, which would allow international students to return and quarantine in facilities similar to what was done with Australian Open tennis players earlier on in the year. Now, that is still in the very early stages with Global Victoria.
Just on that though, Pat, just briefly, yeah, on the tennis players, sorry, because there was a big storm over that. Well, if you can get extra people in for the tennis, couldn't you get extra people in somehow for Australians returning overseas? We know the city relies a lot on students. Do you think there's going to be a bit of a furore, though, over that comparison again?
Well, we know that in Victoria especially, there's a huge contingent of international students, and so for the economy it's extremely important whether people will react the same way to returning international students as they did to Australian Open tennis players who came here earlier in the year. Well, that's yet to be seen, and we probably won't see it until those proposals get off the ground. They are still all in the very early stages, and the state-based agencies are yet to hand any of that over to the federal government, who need to rubber stamp it. So it still might be some way off, Tom.